and welcome to the From Nature to Nurture podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and I am here today with our 18th episode. It is currently single digits outside, and the world is covered in snow and ice. At least my world is covered in snow and ice, and it is beautiful. I have been spending many days sitting in the rocking chair in my office next to the window, working on my book while watching the snow fall. It has been so nice. But also, it's just so cozy, and I haven't been super productive, and that's been okay because today we are talking about rose folklore, and rose folklore often talks a lot about softness and being gentle with yourself and slowness and beauty. So we are following the same energy of that in our snow-filled wonderland as we dive into rose folklore today. So, as with any other folklore episode, I always want to start out with my personal folklore with the plant, and rose is no exception. I honestly never loved rose before 2022. I didn't like the smell, I didn't like the taste, but in 2022 is when she made a big impact on me. So at this time, I was still running my business. I had my product line then. I was doing vendor events. I was still teaching. But I also had a full-time day job working at a retail store. And we all know how toxic retail can be. And this is when I really needed Rose. I was beyond stressed. I never felt recognized for how much I put into my work, my day job work. I had a very unhealthy relationship with productivity. I was definitely stuck in that hustle culture, grind culture mentality. And I was constantly taking on new projects from my coworkers. I would pick up their slack. I would juggle my own projects with theirs. I would do anything to kind of help out at work because I liked being known as the helpful one. I was a people pleaser. Let's just be honest. I was very much a people pleaser, very much wanted everyone to think that I was amazing and that I was so helpful. And that's where I put a lot of my own value, was in how much I could help others. Now, there's nothing completely wrong with that, but there needs to be a balance, right? You can't, how does the saying go? You can't pour from an empty cup. Well, I was more than empty. I was a shattered cup because one day, um, my husband found me curled up in a ball on the bathroom floor, just sobbing. And I was saying I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do both jobs. And on top of all of the regular house, family, dog things, we were also trying to conceive at this time. And I was just so overwhelmed with stress, and I was being torn apart by the retail world, that there was no way I was going to be able to conceive a baby on top of just be a regular, healthy, happy human. Um, and so this was when Rose started reaching out to me because I was literally dying from how much stress I was under. And I mean, to be honest, how much stress I put on myself. It wasn't anyone else's fault. It was me. And this is where Rose came up. I would like open social media and bam, there would be someone talking about Rose. I would be out with a friend and they would start talking about Rose. Emails, books, billboards, magazines, commercials, what have you, popping up in my dreams. Rose was everywhere. And I finally started to understand her message. Now, rose is often associated with like love and gentleness and softness, which is correct, but we forget about the message behind the rose thorns, and that is the message that I really needed. Um, the message that Rose had for me was: hold to your boundaries. Don't let others dictate how you live. Soften, release, and protect your energy. I needed that rose thorn medicine as much as I needed those soft petals. I needed to remember to not step over my own boundaries to always be helping others. I needed to take care of myself more, and I needed to be more gentle with myself and not be as hard if I wasn't, um, ticking those boxes and living up to the expectation of our modern hustly world, right? So At that time, I also had 4 cultivated rose bushes that had already been planted on the property when we moved in, but I also started seeing wild rose start to pop up. And at this point, now in 2026, in almost every direction that you look on my property, you are facing some form of rose, which is so beautiful because I am someone who constantly slips back into that mindset of productivity, I need to do more to be able to be worthy kind of loop. And so having those roses everywhere really helped to remind me that that's not true, that I have worth outside of my productivity. I am not here just to work and help and work and help. I also have my own personal dreams and goals and worth outside of what I can offer to others. And rose helps me remember that. So that was 2022. Now we're in 2026, and I've been working a lot with that rose energy. Whenever I find myself back in those loops, I will pull back out rose, whether I am putting it in a tea blend or working with the flower essence or just going and smelling her when they're in bloom. It's so important to me to remember that time in my life and to continue to learn those lessons again and again. Now, when we look at rose history, it is beautiful and vast. We have rose stories from almost the entire world. Every culture has some form of rose. There are hundreds of different cultivars of rose, and so it's really interesting how a lot of different people are working with slightly different types of roses, but they're still getting the same messages and same medicine. And that is something that I find so beautiful with Rose is that she has adapted to all of these different environments to be able to help everyone because we all need the same kind of lessons and healing and support, right? So let's get into some rose history and folklore. So it is believed that cultivated roses come from either Persia or China back in the 5th century BC. During this time, the Chinese would extract oils from the roses in the emperor's garden, and it's said that he had filled his chambers with books of cultivated roses. During that same time, we also have roses appearing in wall paintings and personal items in Egyptian tombs. Rose was a symbol for the Egyptian goddess Isis. Her followers added roses to funeral wreaths to indicate the successful passage of the dead through the Hall of Judgment. It's also said that roses played a part in Cleopatra seducing Mark Antony as she adorned her room with 2 feet of roses on the floor. And then in France, um, we have some fun folklore as well, where we have the sweetbriar, which is Rosa rubignosa, is known in France as Rosa sorcière or the sorcerer's rose, or Rosa du diable, which is the devil's rose, and it's said that it was planted by the devil to create a ladder to heaven, though he was unsuccessful. And then in Christian traditions, we have the rosary. Rosary coming from the Latin rosarium, meaning garland of roses, and they were originally made from the rose hips, the dried fruit. And in Christian Marian traditions, the Virgin Mary is known as Rosa Mystica, and seeing roses in unlikely places is said to be proof that a miracle happened there. In Italy, we have beautiful, beautiful windows with all sorts of rose depictions between different temples and churches and even like office, like a old, office is not the right word, government buildings. They are stunning. You should look up the rose windows in Italy. Now, when we start getting into the Greek world, we have some really fun stories. So, the Greeks have an origin story of how white roses came to be. So, according to Greek poets, the white rose was brought about by the birth of the goddess Aphrodite. As the legend goes, Uranus was the father of the sky and hated his Titan son Kronos, imprisoning him deep beneath the earth. One night, as Oronus went to lie with Gaia, the mother of the earth and of Kronos. Kronos seized his opportunity and attacked his father. He maliciously severed Oronus's genitalia from his body with a sickle. As his father's testicles fell into the sea, Aphrodite was born. As the sea foam around her touched the earth, bushes of white roses appeared. And oddly enough, white roses became a symbol to represent purity and beauty, which is really funny considering what flew into the ocean. Um, so there we have white roses, and I think that's just really funny. But that's also why we have rose and love, with Aphrodite being like the goddess of love and beauty. Um, and you can see like the different layers in of like why things mean what. But we also have a Greek myth of how the red roses came to be, right? So this is that story. Adonis was out hunting boar. Ares, jealous of Adonis, had secretly sent a wild boar to attack him. At the last moment, Ares shared his plan with Aphrodite, and she rushed off to warn him. As she hurried to her lover's aid, she cut herself on a rose bush, and her speckles of blood turned the roses red. Unfortunately, she was too late, and Adonis died from his fatal wound on his thigh. As Aphrodite cried over her lover's body, her tears fell into the pools of blood surrounding them, and the mixtures birthed the anemone flower. Here we see rose being born to symbolize love, passion, and devotion. And the anemone flower. It's really interesting. I can't think of there's not a lot in the like European world of origins of flowers, but we have a lot within Greek and Roman traditions, which is really interesting. It's cool to see how they view the flowers as these sacred symbols, right? Which is, I mean, in all honesty, how we should. But red roses being love, passion, devotion, Aphrodite running to her lover's aid to be able to help him, and she gets hurt on the way but doesn't care, like she's just running. It's really, really beautiful. As we know, Greek and Roman mythology is very similar since the regions are so close and overlapped a lot. They just kind of have different names for different goddesses and gods. But here is a myth that was told in both regions. So here is the story of Chloris, goddess of flowers and springtime. Early one morning, Chloris went walking when she stumbled upon a lifeless body of a woodland nymph. Distraught by the creature's death, Chloris decided to breathe life into it, transforming the nymph's body into a flower. She called out to Zephyrus, her husband and keeper of the west wind, asking him to blow away the clouds in the sky so that Apollo might feed the new plant with sunshine. Aphrodite would add beauty, and Dionysus would gift an intoxicating scent. The three fates or graces would gift this blossom charm, joy, and splendor. They all agreed that this would be the most beautiful flower, truly the queen of flowers. Aphrodite named the flower Rose, dedicating it to her son Eros, the god of love. In some myths, it is said that she was struck by Eros's arrow, and this made her mispronounce his name to Rose, thus giving the flower a name. Chloris then called upon Iris and Aurora to spread the word about her new flower. Iris borrowed a touch of Rose's color, while Aurora paid homage to it by adding its color to the morning sky. Chloris presented the rose to her son. Eros then offered it to the goddess of silence, Harpocrates, hoping to cover up his mother's recent indiscretions. This homage to silence and secrecy would lead to the phrase sub rosa, or beneath the rose. In ancient Roman dining rooms, a rose would be hung on the ceiling to indicate the conversations that needed to be confidential, and many confessional booths still have rose carvings today. So that is another creation myth for Rose. Um, Wild. Just a wild story. But I also love how many different gods and goddesses are talked about in that story, where they're all contributing to this beautiful flower, giving it different scents and charm and joy and splendor, and spreading its colors across the morning sky with our sunrises, and it's a beautiful story. And you see some cool different meanings there with rose, where rose as a morning flower, right? Like Chloris turned this lifeless woodland nymph into a beautiful flower. So we have a death to rebirth, when we also see roses given a lot, at like funerals and different things like that. Um, but we have all of these different deities that came together to create the queen of the flowers, as they said. And then we have the sub rosa, beneath the rose story, which I found probably the most interesting across all of the different folklore that I learned about Rose. Is I love how it turned the creation myth of, Eros gifting it to the goddess of silence to cover up his mother's recent indiscretions, and how it became part of ancient Roman dining rooms and became a symbol for secret conversations, and then is still used in modern churches, in confessional booths. So, so cool how something so ancient, this beautiful imagery of this rose being um, sacred devotion and secrecy, coming all the way through into modern times. Now that we've talked a little bit about creation myths and history, I also want to talk about rose superstitions. So there's a lot of stories around how to cut a rose, how to gift a rose, and like when to work with roses. So let's get into some of those. So in Italy, if you are cutting a rose, be careful that no petals fall to the floor, otherwise you'll have bad luck. There's also a belief that giving a rose in full bloom brings death to the recipient, so you should only give rose buds as gifts and let them bloom on their own. Fascinating. In Scotland, if a red rose blooms in autumn, it means that a wedding is on the way. And it is a bad omen if white roses bloom for a second time in late summer. Also, hanging dried roses above doorways was thought to ward off evil and bring blessings to the household. So, have you heard of florography? For centuries, roses have been used to convey emotions and messages without words. In the Victorian era, the language of the flowers, or florography, was popular because it was a easy way for individuals to communicate their feelings through the careful selection and arrangement of flowers. Roses, in particular, were highly prized for their ability to convey deep emotions and heartfelt messages. Now, this got so specific, and I don't have everything, but I have some, and it's fascinating. So the number of flowers that you had in your bouquet had a meaning, as did whether it was passed off with the right hand or the left hand, how the ribbon was tied. And then, of course, every flower had a different meaning, and every specific color of flower had a different meaning. So let's look at just the roses. So, white roses would be a symbol of purity, innocence, reverence, a new beginning, a fresh start. Red roses were love or I love you. Dark, deep crimson roses were for mourning. Pink roses were grace, happiness, and gentleness. Yellow roses were jealousy and infidelity. Good little message there if you catch someone. Orange roses were desire and enthusiasm. Lavender roses meant love at first sight. And coral roses meant friendship, modesty, and sympathy. So, those who you would give to your friends. It was very popular for both men and women to convey their feelings with these flowers and be able to get out those messages that maybe were too hard to say. Sometimes you're shy or embarrassed, and you could also, hire someone else to give the flowers for you. So you make the arrangement, you tell them exactly how to pass it off so that the message goes through, but you don't have to see their face if they don't feel the same way, right? Now, here is a little poem from the book The Language of Flowers from 1875. There is language little known, lovers claim it as their own. Its symbols smile upon the land, wrought by nature's wondrous hand, and in their silent beauty speak of life and joy to those who seek, for love divine and sunny hours in the language of the flowers. So there you have some rose folklore. With over 300 species and thousands of cultivars of roses, it is no wonder that this plant has permeated our entire world and across multiple cultures. In terms of how to work with rose in a more energetic sense, I'm a firm believer that you can still work with the medicine and the energetics combined. So rose in a tea, rose in a tincture, but you can also make a rose flower essence or add rose to your bath or do a rose facial spray or a room spray. There's so many different ways to incorporate rose into your life. Personally, what I end up doing is when I really need that rose energy is a rose tea, but I know that the flavor can be a bit polarizing for some people. So if you don't like the taste or the smell, adding it to your bath is a really simple way, or a foot soak, or a hydrosol. But we also have flower essences. I think we've talked about flower essences on this. Look up how to make a flower essence. I'm not going to go too in depth, but the flower essence essentially just extracts the vital essence of a plant without any of the physical medicine that it offers. There is no rose smell or taste to it either. So that is a wonderful option for those who do not like that. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope that you loved the stories that I shared and that you learned something new about rose energy. And if you feel called to, I hope you let her come into your heart. If you would like to find out more about my upcoming classes and offerings, you can find me at rootandwandercollective.com. I'll see you along the plant path.